Hello and welcome to another episode of Becca's Talking. It's brought to you by Simcoe Heating and Air. Simcoe is the only name you need to know. Now, I've known Steve at Simcoe for years, and he's been in business for years, actually 35 years. For your heating and air conditioning needs, give him a call, 402-679-3602, 402. Let me try that again, 402-679-3602. Simcoe Heating and Air. Get ready for the winter months. You want to make sure that your furnace is not only in working condition, but in safe working condition. Give them a call. Have them check it out for you. 402-679-3602. Simcoe is the only name you need to know. Now, my guest today, I'll tell you, if you're going to have a nickname, being known as Nebraska's Astronaut has got to be one of the coolest nicknames available. My guest is Clay Anderson, who obviously is Nebraska's Astronaut. But for my first question, I'll start off with a little story here. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. A young kid in the 60s growing up in Cleveland, Ohio. As you know, NASA has a presence in Cleveland. And growing up in Ohio, we had John Glenn, we had Neil Armstrong. I mean, the space deal was a big deal. We were little kids then, and I remember my dad waking me up at 4 a.m. to watch Gemini rocket go. So as a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. Every other kid wanted to be an astronaut. But then I saw what the astronauts have to go through to become one, and I said, "Oh, screw that! That's too much work." You're a kid growing up in Ashland, and you want to be an astronaut.
True.
Tell me how that all came about.
I'm not sure that I know. As a kid in Ashland, I had a dream that I wanted to become an astronaut one day. I didn't have really any idea how to get there. So I pursued science and math in high school, and I pursued it in college, and then I went to graduate school for 2 years. And the real reason I went to graduate school was not because I wanted to be an astronaut, although that was helpful. I didn't want to go to work yet. And right, if you graduate from college, you're expected to go to work. Uh-huh. And so I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do at that time. I knew I didn't want to be I was in physics at Hastings College as an undergraduate, and I didn't want to be a researcher. That was too boring for me. So I went off to Iowa State to discover aerospace engineering to see if that floated my boat a little bit, which it did. I would end up working for NASA in Houston, Texas. And once I got my foot in the door down in Houston, the dream became more real. The dream became more plausible. It seemed like there may be a shot because I was living and working in a place where the other astronauts lived and worked.
And how old are you at this time?
I was about 24.
Now, don't most astronauts, at least maybe it's sort of the John Glenn mystique in that, were fighter pilots and breaking the speed of sound barriers, and you had none of that.
Nope, I had none. So when I first got to Houston, Texas, in the Johnson Space Center as an intern, summer intern, one of the first things I did was go meet with the head of the astronaut selection committee. And his name at that time was Bud Ream. And Bud and I had a talk. I was a pretty nervous young kid, right? And he obviously had this conversation with hundreds of young people like me. And he kind of told me what they were looking for, what was expected, how I might prepare to become a better candidate to be an astronaut. But, I had no intention of joining the military at that time. I had looked into joining the Navy when Charles Stone was representing Nebraska in Congress, and so I got my letter of recommendation, but I never pursued it, right? For some reason, at that time, military didn't appeal to me very much.
Yeah.
When I went to Iowa State, I would go to Des Moines to the recruiting center down there, and I took the Air Force exam and was exceptionally well qualified. But when I talked to the actual people that implemented that EWQ, they call it, I said, well, what happens if my eyes aren't good enough to be a fighter pilot? And they said, well, you'll be stuck behind a desk for 5 or 6 years, and that didn't appeal to me either. So I didn't go that route. I just took a chance and went down to Houston and worked as an intern for a second time. I got a full-time job in 1983, and then I guess the rest is history.
So you become an astronaut. Mm-hmm. You go in the training. How many other people are there with the same dream to become an astronaut? I mean, just, again, growing up during that era when I did, there were 7 of you. All right. How many astronauts are there now?
I don't know the number now. It's probably around 50 I guess. But back then, I was one of 2,400 plus applicants in the year I got selected, in 1998. A couple of years ago, they had 18,000 applicants because now it's on the internet, right? It's easier to get the information out. People hear about it. They apply whether they're qualified or not, and because it's easier, right? I had to go to a typewriter with whiteout and make sure I was selecting.
Boy, you're old.
I am. But, that was important.
Yeah.
You only had one form, and you had to do it right, and you had to have whiteout, right? Because as a typist, we all know how difficult that can be. And then there were the spaces that they gave you to put your information were tiny. And so you had to be very judicious about what you put on your application or not. And it wouldn't be until several applications in that I kind of learned the game that was being played by some of these guys that applied. And they were turning in supplemental data, right? They would do their forms, but then they'd turn in a 3 or 4 page supplement, that had all this other information on it. I was like, well, crap, that ain't fair. Maybe I need to do that. And finally, in I think it was my last application, I decided to turn in a couple pages of bullet points that told more about what I had done in my life and career. And I don't know if that mattered or not. I got in, but I don't know that mattered.
You say your last application. Mm-hmm. Now, was it your last application because you got admitted, or was that it was like one more time and that's it?
No, it was the last one I submitted because I got selected.
Yeah.
Didn't have to submit anymore. But
how many times did it take?
I applied 15 times.
15?
Once every year for 15 years. So I was rejected 12 times before I got an interview in the 13th year. I got rejected then after that interview, and then I applied in year 14, and they didn't. So many of those years they didn't select. In the early days, they selected astronauts every year until Challenger happened, and then they went to every other year. And then after that, they stayed every other year until Columbia happened, and then the delta between selections got longer and became more varied. So I was in that 2-year time frame, and I would apply religiously every year with no hope of getting selected until I got lucky in year 13 and got interviewed. Was not selected, came back in year 15 and got interviewed again and was selected. So,
and even though you're selected, I mean, there's no guarantee you're ever going to go up in space, is there?
Right, correct. There were, in the 96 class, there were 3 astronauts that were selected out of the 44 that never made it to space. In my class, we had 2 that didn't make it. One because she died in an airplane accident, and the other guy, he basically quit and went back to Seattle, Washington. I don't know why. Maybe he got tired of the BS.
Did you ever feel like quitting? I mean, because I look at what they showed back in my day when I was a kid. They'd put you on a gyroscope and you'd be spinning around at 900 miles an hour, and you'd have to be underwater for days. And I mean, they really, that's a very rigorous procedure to become an astronaut.
Yeah, I think though to apply and get selected, there's no. I don't know. It's not that tough.
Right.
I mean, they put me in a rescue sphere, they called it, which was a little medicine ball thing, and I had to curl up inside and sit for 40 minutes and not freak out. And I just took a nap. I mean, it was pretty easy for me. They had psych interviews and things like that. So until you get selected, once you become an astronaut, then the training and that sort of things become more intense. But the application process, I found it relatively simple. Tedious, but relatively simple.
But you say there were times you felt like just giving up, huh?
Yeah, I wanted to quit. Let's see. My wife and I had traveled to Seattle, Washington to visit a high school friend who was up there working for Microsoft and Bill Gates. And we had hoped to maybe interview at Boeing and see if we could get a job for me up there. And we would relocate to Boeing because I'd basically given up. Doesn't really work this way. Well, we came back from Boeing unsuccessful in our quest for new employment. And just shortly after our return to Houston from Seattle, I got a phone call for my first interview. So then the flame was lit again, right? Holy crap, they're interested. And so I didn't think about getting another job anymore. I just kept plugging away to become an astronaut. So
okay, so you're an astronaut. You go through all the training. You go through everything. Mm-hmm. How many times have you been up now?
I went up twice.
You went up twice. And for how long at each time?
152 days the first time on the International Space Station, and the second time was about a 15-day, 2-hour mission with Discovery.
So which of the two do you prefer?
Long duration was way cooler.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go through what I went through in 9 years of training and putting up with all that crapola and putting up with all the competition and putting up with all the travel and being in Russia and speaking Russian, and, it would have been hugely disappointing to only go for a week or 2 weeks. So for me to be able to go for a 5-month stay made it the right amount, right? Could I have stayed longer than 5 months? Yeah, I think my wife and I might have been able to do 6, maybe 7. Mm-hmm. But after that, I'd have been bored. It would have been tedious. I'd have been angry because it's time to go home. You told me I was going home, and so that's why I look at this Butch and Sonny thing with the Starliner with great interest, because they're both military fighter pilots. They're both very gung-ho for mission success. They'll be fine.
You're talking about the Boeing people, right?
The Boeing people, yeah. They'll be fine staying until February of next year, but, I don't know that I could have done that. I don't know that my mental makeup was such that it would have taken a big shift for me to get over the anger part and saying, what are you guys doing to me? I was only supposed to be up here 8 or 9 days, and now you're telling me I'm going to be up here until February. That's quite a different thing. So
now, when you were growing up and you're going to be up there, like you said, 5 months, mm-hmm. I assume they brought, many changes of underwear, many changes of clothes and all
mm-hmm.
that. These people were going to be back, in a day and a half. So what happens to them? Are there facilities there to wash your clothes, or there's things?
No, there's no washing capability on the space station. It's too tedious. It wastes water and all sorts of different reasons. But the resupply process to the International Space Station has not been affected by any of this Starliner stuff. So Starliner is a vehicle that brought 2 people on a test ride. And that vehicle is going to go home so they can bring up more vehicles that bring crew members. But the process to supply the station has been going on the same without fail for quite some time now. So everybody's going to have plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of underwear, plenty of T-shirts, all those good things.
If you got a call tomorrow and said, hey, we want you to go up again.
I'd go.
But here, part 2 of the question.
Uh-huh.
But it's going to be on a Boeing aircraft.
I'd still go.
So you would trust
mm-hmm.
Boeing?
I think this is Clay talking, and I don't have any data. I think they would have been fine coming home on the Starliner. I think that the Boeing engineers felt very comfortable with their vehicle. I think Butch and Sonny would have felt very comfortable with that vehicle. And after all, they are test pilots. That's what they get paid to do, right? And so I think that if it were me in the decision-making chair, I would probably say, let's bring them home on Starliner. But the NASA people were very conservative. They were very safety-oriented for both the crew and the vehicle they were talking about. But I think they might have been a little ultra-conservative. But I don't get paid to make those decisions.
You say Butch and Sonny, like you know them. Do you keep in contact with the astronauts that are still in the program?
Some. Butch and Sonny. Sonny and I trained a lot together. Sonny was my space sister. We haven't stayed in touch very much, right? My life went one way and her life stayed at NASA. Had I stayed at NASA, I'm sure we'd be in contact with each other. Butch Wilmore came in after I had been an astronaut for a while. And he and I would see each other in the gym occasionally and things like that. And I'd fly with him in the T-38. But once you get assigned to a space mission, you're kind of isolated from everybody else. Life goes on with them, life goes on with you, but you're training with your crew over and over again. So I have a much closer relationship with those that I've trained with and flew with. Sonny, I think the world of her, and we had a lot of good times together and a lot of interesting adventures together. And I hope that we can be friends forever and down the line. Now, whether I'll get to see her or not, a lot of times that happens at astronaut reunions and events like that. But, I'm a little bit isolated from that these days as well. You
said when you were up there for the 5 months, you were getting bored.
Yeah,
that just blows my mind. I mean, how can you're in the galaxies, you're in space, but I guess after a while, it's like, oh, there's another star.
No, that's not the part that's boring. So the part that's boring is getting up and doing the same thing every day. I mean, everybody lives in their house, right? If you have a dog, every day you got to feed your dog, you got to walk your dog, you got to give your dog water. Every day you do the wash, and you clean your clothes, and you dry your clothes, and you fold your clothes, and every day you eat, and you prepare food, and you clean the dishes, and you put the dishes away. Maybe you mow the yard every weekend and edge and put all those tools away and clean them up. After a while, some of this becomes redundant and a little boring, a little dull. Some of it you do it from rote memory, right? And it's not a big deal. You just go over to the panel and you do boom, 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 and you're done. Well, that's okay because it gives you more free time. And the free time is where you're able to look out the windows, take photographs of the Earth, write down your thoughts about how your mission's going, or call your family on the special telephone, or exercise, or sit down and chat with your Russian cosmonaut buddies, right? Those are the things that make that space flight unique and make it non-boring. It's the repetitive stuff, the toilet breaks all the time, right? So you got to fix the toilet. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's a job.
To a layman like me, it's but after a while, that's your job.
But you're maintaining your house, right? And maybe you're doing a little construction on your house, maybe doing an add-on. But after a while, you've added on everything you're going to add, and now you have to worry about things that break, that are getting old, and that you have to replace, and you have to be ready to do that. And then in today's world on the space station, somebody says, okay, we're going to bring up a ton of experiments, and that's what you're going to do. You're going to do experiments. Well, some people, that's great. They love that sort of stuff. But if you remember, I said that back in the day I was doing physics at Hastings. I didn't want to be a researcher. I didn't want to be a lab person. That was not my desire for a substantial life. So I'm glad I was there in the building phase and I wasn't there too much for the science, because some of the science is tedious. Hey, pull out this laptop, lift the lid, make sure the clock's ticking, make sure the green square is green, dust off the back where the fan gets dusty, close the laptop, push it back in. Well, yeehaw, but I'm not doing science, right?
Right.
I'm not doing a real science investigation of X, Y, or Z. Some of them are now, but most of them are basically, they're scientific experiments designed by a scientist to have minimal involvement with a dumbass astronaut in space, right? They don't want you to screw up their experiment.
Yeah. Point of reference, how big is a space station? I mean, it just is it like the size of an apartment complex? How big is it?
So physically, the solar array panels would fit inside Memorial Stadium from end zone to end zone. Then
how many are there?
Four sets. So the length of the space station is 120 yards plus, right? It's that length of Memorial Stadium from the tip of the end zone to the tip of the end zone. But it's also the same width across the field from sideline to sideline. So you could lay the International Space Station down on the green artificial turf of Memorial Stadium, and it would probably touch and fill the entire bottom level of that stadium. Now, that's just how big it is. The living volume is not nearly as big. It's when I was there, it was a 3-bedroom house, roughly, with one kitchenette and one toilet. Now it's a 4-bedroom house with 2 kitchenettes and 2 toilets. So it's expanded a little bit.
And how many people are up there at any one time?
When I was there, we had 3 was typically the number. You could we swelled to 10 when the STS-118 crew arrived, and then they went home, and we went back to 3, and then the next crew from Discovery came, and there were 7 of them, and we went back to 10. But nowadays, it's 13 or so, because each SpaceX Dragon brings 4, each Russian Soyuz brings 3, and so there's the possibility when you change crews out, right, that you bring 4 new SpaceX people to replace the 4 old SpaceX people, so that's 8. And then if you have a Soyuz group, that's 9, 10, 11. And if another Soyuz is coming up sometimes in that time frame, that's 12, 13, 14. So it can get a little crowded.
Now, I've had roommates, and I know it doesn't always go smoothly.
No, you're right.
And I would imagine the fact that you're dealing here with roommates that are Russian, completely different cultures, that even though you're there basically for the same thing, you're still completely different people. I mean, all of a sudden now, here's Sergey, he's your new best friend. How does that work?
I was blessed with Fyodor Yurchikhin and Oleg Kotov, two really outstanding cosmonauts from Russia. Both could speak very good English. Oleg's English was as good as mine, it seemed like. Fyodor's English was good, probably as good as my Russian. And so between the three of us, we were called Kosmichesky Brati, Space Brothers. And the folks in the media down in Russia called us Три Mushketiri na Orbite, the Three Musketeers in space.
I got the Three Musketeers part.
And so we worked together very well. We had a great time together. But, like anything, roommates can be roommates. I remember when I first got there, Fyodor was the commander, and he gave me the tour of the ship, and he showed me where all the emergency stuff was as a reminder because I'd been trained on all this stuff. But then he took me to the bathroom, and he says, Clay, when you use wipes, fill container. So if empty, fill. Right? Well, yeah, that makes sense. If you're going to use the last of something, you put up a new bag. And so that made total sense until I went in there and the bag would be empty. And I would look at it for a second and I'd chuckle and I'd go, should I get mad about this? No. This is very small potatoes. All I'm going to do is grab another bag and cut the opening and put it on the wall and throw away the old, right? It's not worth getting your panties in a wad for something like that. But we had those kind of small issues where I liked coffee with cream and sugar. Fyodor liked total black coffee, and Oleg liked black coffee with sugar. Well, you'd think that'd be perfect, right? Well, it was until Fyodor and Oleg drank all the coffee. And so then they went and stole my coffee, and then I had no coffee, right? So we spent that whole time arguing about where the coffee was, and so I would call the ground and say, hey, can the next crew bring me some coffee with cream and sugar? And then I hid it. I put it where they could never find it so that I always knew that I had some. So
now, when you say coffee, I'm thinking, the old days of Tang, right? Is this like instant coffee, like Maxwell House instant coffee, or is it? Do you get perk, your own coffee? I mean, what type of coffee is this?
Well, in our days, it was instant, right? And I had Kona coffee from Hawaii with cream and sugar. I don't know what the other brands were, but I didn't really care.
Now, when you were up there, things I think are a little bit better as far as diplomacy between America and Russia. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, there's a lot more tension between the two countries. Does that play a part of that, or is that basically you guys are astronauts and the space commands? They're all focused on that. They don't give a damn about Ukraine or about NATO or anything like that. I mean, is that all just let the politicians worry about that, and you guys are going to be up in space?
Well, obviously, I wasn't up there during this Ukrainian conflict with Russia. When I lived with Fyodor and Oleg, I would try to talk to them about Putin, and they would not talk at all about that. They did not discuss politics at all. They would ask me about President Bush at the time, and I'd say, well, I like the guy. I think he does this good, but he doesn't do this very well, or his wife's really nice. We'd talk generalities because they were very interested in America. But when then I tried to flip the tables on them and say, well, what about Putin? They would just clam up.
Was that because they're afraid to say anything about Putin?
I believe so. I think that their culture and and the other thing people have to realize is when I flew in space, I was getting my government salary from NASA. When they flew in space, they were getting more than what they would earn on the ground. So Oleg told me they roughly earned $6,000 American dollars a year as a cosmonaut. But when they flew, that number was 10 times that, so 60,000. So they could become very wealthy by flying in space. And so they didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize them getting their salary and their increased payment by virtue of the fact that they did work in space. And there was a rumor that the more you did, or if you solved a problem that was seemingly unsolvable, you'd get a bonus. And so they had a lot of monetary capability by being space flyers. And we didn't have any of that, right? If I flew in space, I got the same pay as if I lived on the ground. The only thing I got from being in the space station was a bit of a per diem. So I got a check at the end of my 5 months in space for $172.46 or something.
Total or per day?
Total.
$172 for 5 months up there?
5 months in space. So it was some deal to do with per diem. And I had room and board, right? So I just had incidentals.
you got,
And there's no Walmart up there, so
yeah, 50 cents a day per diem. Yeah,
you don't really need a lot of incidental money.
Yeah, what's the exchange rate up there in space?
Yeah.
Okay, so you say they're doing experiments. Obviously, the Russians are up there doing experiments.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sharing information on this, or is this something that's like, yeah, guys, we're working on this, you work on your stuff, and, we'll see you at dinner?
Yeah, it was kind of work on yours, work on theirs. We would help each other if we needed to, but that wasn't the way it was designed. It was designed for me to do most of the work on the American side and them to do most of the work on the Russian side. Although I thought it was cool that I got to do a couple procedures for the Russian communication system as part of the crew, right? It makes you feel more a part of the big group. I didn't ever want to be that guy isolated in the American segment and only doing American stuff. And, I wanted to be able to help them out. And the nice thing for the Russians was they wrote me into some of their timeline activities. And I think America wrote Fyodor and Oleg into some of the timeline activities simply because not everything's doable by a single American astronaut. Sometimes you need help. And the only people that can help you are the two Russian guys. So,
are your experiments technological, communication, those sorts of things? Or are they like medical, or is it a little bit of everything?
All sorts of that. We did, Oleg was a medical doctor, so he gave us physicals every month. They were not very detailed, but Clay, how you feeling? Oh, good. And he'd write down, Clay feels good, But we did technical experiments, we did biological experiments, we did mental experiments, we did all sorts of different stuff. And of course, as the space station has matured over the years, the science gets better and a little more detailed because they find issues that astronauts and cosmonauts are experiencing, and then they come up with scientific experiments to help them figure out what's going on for real and how they might be able to placate that down the line.
Now, you talk about experiments, and I apologize up front for the indelicate nature of this question.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious. There have been women that have spent time up there. Have they done experiments about sex in space? No names. Just
Yeah, we didn't. I think they look at that as we're all professionals. I was up there with some female astronauts, but that never became an issue for us. I know there are rumors of things that happened with other space flyers that were in space at the same time. But we never had anything specific like that. All I can tell you is that somebody sent me a file of a young lady from Canada that did the weather report. And when she gave the weather report, she also did a striptease. So
a closed circuit for the astronauts?
No, just for me, right?
Oh.
It was something that was on my laptop, and it was a private file, and I don't even remember where I got it, but that's the kind of goofiness that would go on. But none of the. I don't know what they do now. I don't know if there's anything, because you need to talk about this if we're going to go to Mars, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to put males and females on aboard a spaceship that's going to travel 6 to 9 months just to get to the planet Mars, they're going to stay there 6 to 9 months because they have to wait for the planets to align such that it will only take 6 to 9 months to get home. That's a long time. And that's a long time to be away from your loved ones and your spouse and that kind of closeness, I guess. So those are questions that need to be asked. I don't know when they're going to ask them or how they're going to address them, but I would think that one of these days we have to.
What did you learn? I'm not talking about like the scientific stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking more about, I remember when, William Shatner went up, and comes back down and was just talking about the impact it had on his life.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine having spent all that time up in space and then coming back to Earth and being the same person.
Oh, it definitely has an effect. You'll hear, Shatner is a bit dramatic, but that's William Shatner, right?
Yeah.
But he talked about how it changed him. And astronauts, most of them call that the overview effect. When you get a chance to go into space and overview the Earth, see the Earth from above, it's a privilege. And it's a privilege that none of us take lightly. I understand the overview effect totally. many astronauts then will come back and talk about protecting the planet and the atmosphere is so thin. It's we shouldn't pollute, which we shouldn't. We should take care of our spaceship that we're all on the human planet. Mm-hmm. I agree with all that. But what I would tell people, and what I still tell people, is that I'm a man of faith. And what happened to me in space was that I just strengthened my belief in God. And I strengthened it because as I looked at the planet every day, I didn't see weakness. I saw uniformity and structure. None of what I saw was random, none of it. From the mountains and the rivers that empty to the oceans and the icebergs and the deserts and all of it, it just seems totally non-random to me. And taking that view of non-randomness makes me believe fully and more strongly in the God that I believe in. Now, as part of that, we have, as humans, a responsibility to take care of our spaceship. Tom Becca needs to take care of his. Clay needs to take care of his. But I'm not going to go after you and scream at you and tell you how you should take care of your part of the planet. I'm going to look inside and say, what can I do personally to better my lot and to better the lot of my planetary species? If I have billions of dollars like Elon Musk, I may do X. If I have billions of dollars like Bill Gates, I may do Y. But when I hear somebody like Gates wants to squirt a chemical into the air to cover the planet and block the sun, I don't know if I buy that, right? So there are different ways that people deal with all of this stuff. I'm a big believer in science and the scientific method. I'm not a drama queen. I believe in getting data and valid data, that's realistic, that tells the true story. And if you get enough people in the room that are willing to talk and listen and discuss that true data, you can get to solutions. It's
I can't imagine spending that time up there and just seeing what you saw and were able to experience and not coming back with some sort of spiritual, feelings.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, and the other part is family is hugely important to me. And so I experienced all of those things, but I also experienced the strengthening in the family bond, right? My wife did everything for me and my kids while I was in space. And she did it without complaint, and she did it beautifully. I couldn't have survived without her, and knowing that she was down on the earth, totally competent, dealing with the whole situation. There are astronaut families that don't have that stability, that I don't know how they do it, but sometimes there's a disconnect between Earth and space, and the same thing with training.
Now, of course, again, my point of reference is things like The Right Stuff and that. The astronaut wives there all sort of hung together. But now when you got so many different, 50 astronauts or whatever.
Right. Do
the wives form a community as well? Or because you bond with the other astronauts. Do the astronauts' wives bond as well?
Kind of depends. When I became a new astronaut, a baby astronaut is the phrase I use, there was an astronaut spouse group. And my wife was very adamant about being a part of that group. But she found she had higher hopes for the group in terms of what they could do as a group versus what they chose to do as a group. And the other part that made it different for us is Susan and I had lived in Houston for a long time. We already had our circle of friends. We had our church family. We had our neighborhood groups and the things we did and the people we hung out with. And so when all the astronauts come in, many of them are from out of town and they're brand new to the city of Houston. Well, their needs are a little different in terms of that bonding and that astronaut group and that astronaut spousal group. And so it's more important to them and it becomes more of a social grouping rather than a do things grouping, hey, what if we read to little kids? Or what if we, do a Habitat for Humanity house as a group of astronauts? Oh, well, we could do that, but maybe we won't. So it kind of depends on who's the leadership is and whether their existential existence outside of Houston and they're in Houston for the first time. And on all astronaut classes and their groups are different. So it just kind of depends. Yeah. Lots of variability there.
You and I have a mutual friend in Jeff Katurba. He's very proud of the fact that you took 2 of his cartoons up in space with him.
Yeah, I know that.
And I also heard that you also took the Nebraska Cornhuskers, the Big N, a number of the Big N's up there, and you've hidden one on the space station, and you won't say where it is.
That's correct. All that is correct. So Katerba's a friend. He did do a couple cartoons. He did actually several of a series of cartoons when I was in space. I've tried to gather originals of most, if not all of those, and have that collection because I think it's very cool. And then he prepared, actually at my request, he prepared a couple to take into space on my second trip. And then I did take several big red ends from Coach Tom Osborne that he provided to me. I would always wear one on my cuff checklist for my 6 EVAs. So if you look at EVA pictures, you might see that big red end on my cuff checklist. And then one of them is hidden in a very special place on the International Space Station, and I am the only astronaut or person on the planet or off the planet that knows where it is.
Okay, I don't expect you to tell me where it is, but can you tell me why you won't tell anybody where it is?
It's kind of I'm the only astronaut from Nebraska.
Yeah.
First and only. I hope that gets fixed down the road, but here I am, retired for, 2013 so 11 years I've been retired, and I haven't picked another astronaut since I came in 1998. Shame on them. But I'm very, very proud to be that first Nebraska astronaut, and the one symbol that anyone in the United States of America will see and understand that it's Nebraska is the big red N. Now, it's not football necessarily, but it's Nebraska, and that's why I chose that symbol. One of my crew colleagues that came later after me on the space station, he took the New York Yankees symbol to space. Well, that's not the same. The New York Yankees represent one baseball entity in Major League Baseball, but the big red N represents a state of people, a culture, a class of people, right?
Plus the Yankees suck, but that's another story.
That's true. That's true.
I want to ask you about your new position now as head of the Strategic Air Command Air and Space Museum. Get to that in a second, but I got to give another plug for my buddy Steve over at Simcoe Heating and Air. Steve Simcoe Heating and Air, 35 years in business. The man knows it all, right? If you've got a problem with your furnace, your air conditioning, you want to just make sure that your furnace is safe this coming winter, give him a call, 402-679-3602. I promise you, Steve's not going to try to, sell you a new furnace if all you need to do is change the filter. He's not one of those guys, right? He will be honest with you, straightforward with you, and treat you right when it comes to the price. Give him a call, 402-679-3602. Simcoe, CYMCO. Simcoe, the only name you need to know. Okay, so now you are in charge of the Strategic Air Command Air and Space Museum, which, I'll be honest, I haven't been in years, but I just don't have little kids in my family anymore, and so I don't think about going there. I mean, that was always a thing,
Right.
and the kids, hey, let's go to the museum. But I'm still a little kid when it comes to that stuff. I mean, I love what you have out there. And as we were getting ready for this interview, you told me that being in charge of the museum was more difficult than being an astronaut.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, absolutely. That's
How
true.
so?
Well, an astronaut's got a pretty easy life. They hand you a schedule for the week, and you basically go and do what they tell you, what the schedule tells you. And then in the times that you have empty slots on your schedule, you work out, you have lunch, you study, you do the other things that you need to do. So I found that very easy to just follow the schedule. You could make changes. Hey, I want to go on vacation here. I want to take Friday off. You could do that. But my whole career as an astronaut was schedule-based. Even in Russia was schedule-based. Well, then, you look at it from a different perspective, and running a museum every day is totally different every day. I have to find funds to make the museum go. I have to hire and fire people. I have to deal with 2 septic pumps that failed on the same day in the middle of the summer last year. And now I got to figure out how am I going to pay for new ones? Where do I even get new ones? Oh, they come from Germany. They do, and they have to be built in Germany. How long does that take, right? What do we do in the meantime? Well, we got to rent a pump, and we got to pump through a pipe over the hill to the retention ponds for the Mahoney State Park. Everything's, and that's what makes it fun and unique and different, but it also makes it much more difficult.
What have you got going on in the museum right now? What sort of events have you got coming up?
So this is a big weekend for us. September 8th will be Hero Fest. It's our first Hero Fest. We want to make it an annual event. We want to have Hero Fest and the Father's Day Car Show and Santa Goes to Space as our 3 premier events annually. We want to throw in a couple for kids at Halloween and Easter. But this Hero Fest will be representing veterans and first responders. We invite everybody to come out. Veterans and first responders get in free. We're going to have music. We're going to have some food. We're going to have all sorts of great stuff. We're also bringing in some new simulators in the month of October, which have been needed for quite some time. We have new exhibits. We have Mission Astronaut coming in January of 2025. I'm trying to do a lot of what I call visual new. So, Tom, you haven't been there in forever. We should come out because there's lots of visually new things that you haven't seen before.
I will be out there soon.
And so that's part of the deal, right? Many of the exhibits are being refreshed. Some are being closed down. They're just old. We're 25 years old in the year 2024, and now we're on our next 25 years. So it's my job, my role, and my responsibility to make this place new and exciting and different. We'll build on the history of Strategic Air Command and all those really cool airplanes, but we're trying to create new exhibits. For example, the SR-71. Everybody knows it. It's right there in the front of our atrium. It's the biggest plane, the coolest plane that we have in the museum. We don't have an exhibit that goes with it. Never have. Well, how do we screw that up? So now we're getting artifacts from SR-71 pilots and aviators, and we're trying to create a new exhibit that will go with that aircraft. So we're doing that all across the museum. You'll see that when you come, and hopefully you'll go, hey, that's new. I haven't seen that before. And then we have great programs. We had a great summer camp season. We're going to have off-season camps that start up here pretty soon, so people should go to www.sacmuseum.org, and they should check out our brand new website in 2024. They can drive by Highway 66 and see our brand new digital sign that's outside the museum that lets people know what's going on. So there's lots of changes happening. We endeavor to entertain, educate, and inspire, and we want to show everybody that visits our museum, we want them to be able to see what's possible.
Do you get a lot of attention, like during the College World Series or Berkshire Hathaway, people that are all coming into town? Do they know about the museum, to go out to Ashland and to see it?
We're working on that part, and we hope so, yes. So part of the job is you have to advertise, and you have to have money to advertise. So being on your podcast is a great way for me to advertise and help you and help me at the same time. We want all those people for Berkshire Hathaway. We want all those College World Series people that don't have a game that day, right, to come out to our museum and see what's going on. We want to partner with the Mahoney. We want to partner with the Gene Simmons Wildlife Safari Park. We want to partner with Ashland and Glacial Till and Cellar 426 and Fariner Bakery, right? That exit 426 has got some really cool stuff going on there, and it's our job to figure out how to bring people out there, and that's one of the big things that we're trying to do.
Does the philanthropic community in town, do they help you a lot? I mean, I look at what Jocelyn is doing with their new museum and Western Heritage and that. Does the philanthropic community, are they helpful? Are they beneficial to your museum?
Absolutely. We've been very blessed by some very key donors since I've been here for 2.5 years. That was part of the reason I came home. But we need more. We need more support from more varied donors, right? We have to have a pool of folks that support us, not just a couple. We're working on that as well. As I said before, 2024 in May ended our 25th year of existence at the location in Ashland. And so now we're beginning and embarking on the next 25 years. So it's my job to go out and my responsibility to find more donors and diversify the donor pool and help us get to the point where we want to be what we want to be in the next 25 years, which is the Education and Innovation Center of the Midwest.
And the web address again for that is?
www.sacmuseum.org.
I got about 1 million questions that I want to ask, but I'll maybe 2 or 3 more, and then I'll let you out of here. You say that you'd like to see more Nebraskans become astronauts.
Yes, sir.
Are you aware, I mean, of Nebraskans that are attempting to be astronauts? Or, like I said, when I was a kid, every kid my age wanted to be an astronaut, right? But now all these kids got all their digital phones and all this stuff. Some of the imagination is out of it, I think. Do kids still want to be astronauts? Do you have people coming up to you and saying, how do I do this?
I do. As an adjunct professor at Iowa State, I have a lot of those students who get time with me and come into my office and talk to me about what it takes. I have a lot of kids, young people coming to the museum and asking the same questions, and I think that's awesome. I can't wait to see who the next Nebraska astronaut is. I'm sure there are kids out there that want to be astronauts and kids from Nebraska, and that's part of my role. I have to go out. I want to see as many of these kids as possible because I need them to know that they're just like me. Every kid in Nebraska is just like me. They can do the same things I did if they want to, if they work hard, put their mind to it. They need a little luck. But hey, I'm here now in Nebraska, resident here, to help them out. And I want to find all those kids and help them get to the end. And
I'll say that no matter what their dreams are, whether it's be an astronaut or whatever they may be, they can accomplish those dreams.
Absolutely.
And they said a little bit of luck sometimes, you need a little bit of luck. But at the same time, you work hard, you follow your dreams, and you can make it happen. Last question. Throughout all of this, were there times when you were scared? Were there times when you thought you were in real danger?
No, I don't think. What I tell people is NASA trains the scare out of you. Little kids will ask me, or their parents will ask me the same question. I'll say, well, do you ride a bike? When you get on your bike, are you scared? No. Were you scared maybe the first time you rode your bike? Yeah. Right? But we train to alleviate that fear. We train to be so focused on the job that we have to do that we don't think about the fear that's part of it. Yeah, I could have died. I knew I could have died. Maybe the only time I thought about it was before I launched the first time when I was writing a goodbye letter to my family. Because as soon as I got on that rocket and launched, there was a great chance that I wasn't coming home again. And so I had a letter prepared to my wife and kids. I took that same letter when I launched the second time, and I modified it for the circumstances, and I had it ready to go again. Both of those letters are in my memoir. Actually, it's a single letter, but it's the combined version, right? But it's in my letter or memoir, The Ordinary Spaceman. I believe it's important for people to know what my thought process was in that vein before I launched. But once you put on your spacesuit and head toward the rocket, all those fear things go out the window because you're there to do a job. And that's, I never got in a situation. Now I probably could have, right? But I never got in a situation in space except when the toilet broke where I was actually scared. You don't want to be in a space station and have a broken toilet. But
I would imagine that.
That's probably the scariest thing. But other than that, there were no Star Wars clones that were trying to attack our spaceship. There were no aliens out there. Fyodor and Oleg didn't turn on me and come at me with some kind of weaponry, to take out the American astronaut and control the space station. And,
I made a lousy movie then. Now you just want to make a lousy movie.
Lousy movie, absolutely.
I'll tell you what, I could sit here and talk to you about this all day, man.
Just have me on again.
Well, I will. Actually, I will, because there's so much, and we didn't get into your memoir. We didn't get into. You also have written some children's books, right?
Yes.
About this, and so we'll get into all of that a lot next time. You say you weren't frightened. Your wife and your kids, they probably didn't say anything to you before you went up. But when you're home safe and sound, did they say if they were scared, if they were frightened?
Yeah, my first flight, Cole was 10 and Sutton was 6. And so Sue was with them on top of the launch control center, which is back then that was the typical place for you to watch your spouse and your family watch you launch into space. And that was a pretty emotional moment, and it was documented in both my book and the NPR documentary called Homemade Astronaut, the NET back then, but now it's NPR. And, as Sue was hugging both of the kids with her arms across her shoulders of each one, there were tears crying happening. And my little girl was 6, and she said, "Mommy, it's okay. You don't have to cry." And, Sue says to Sutton that I'm not crying. It was my son. And, that's pretty powerful stuff that I didn't know about until I came home. And I remember we were wrestling around in Cole's bedroom, Sutton and Cole and I, when I had gotten back from my 5 months trip to the space station. And that's the first time I actually began to talk to them about that. And Sutton, she was kind of happy-go-lucky because she was going to be famous. People were going to talk to her on the TV. And, so she was different. And Cole was way more emotional and way more scared because he had watched other astronauts' children who were older and knew of Challenger and Columbia, saying things like, don't explode, don't blow up, please don't blow up. My son's hearing that, and he doesn't know how to deal with that, right? The second time I flew in 2010 with STS-131, they were both 4 years older, much more mature and much more relaxed about the scenario. Plus, they knew Dad was only going to be gone a couple weeks, right? It wasn't going to be 5 months. So it was way different for them. But it was the same for me as I got ready to launch for that mission because I didn't know if I'd ever come home. And so those emotional balances that take place within your family, within you, and my wife, I'm sure she had a little bit of fear. But she's tough as nails, and she wasn't going to let our kids see her afraid, right? Because she was the entity that was going to keep things together. So
10-year-old kid, your dad's an astronaut. That had to be cool. When you're in school, my dad sold insurance. Dad was a great guy, but he sold insurance. If he was an astronaut, I would have been much more popular in school. More popular in school. Clay, good seeing you, my friend. Thank you very much for being here. We will have you back on at a future date. Go to the museum. Go, bring the family, take the kids, go and just by yourself, check it out. Because, like I said, even before you got there, it was the last time I was there. And there was so much cool stuff then. Mm-hmm. So now I know that there's a lot more to see and a lot more to do. So check it out, the museum. I will be there soon. Go and check it out. Of course, this podcast is brought to you by Simcoe Heating and Air, the only name you need to know, 402-679-3602, 35 years of experience, family-owned business, good people, Simcoe, CYMCO, the only name you need to know. Till next time, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Bye, y'all.